I actually had noticed an article on the Christian Science Monitor. It was the cover story, and it's titled "Interfaith America: Being Both is a Rising Trend in the U.S." And I thought it was an interesting article. It lists a number of statistics about families in the U.S. and trends in the U.S. as far as interfaith marriages and interfaith families, but it looks like there's a big spike upward in not only interfaith marriage, but in couples deciding to maintain both faiths. So they're marrying interfaith and then they're staying interfaith, and they're raising the children interfaith. And they've got now, like we were looking at this just before the show, and we were reading about like they have interfaith schools where the children can go and learn about different faiths, and a lot of these people are opting for things like that when they have kids, so that it's not an issue. The children are more likely to be thinking about their own religious views because they're being presented with like multiple and conflicting views sometimes, or the idea that that there is a theistic environment in the home, but not necessarily like a dogmatic fundamentalism that overrides the belief. So it looks like it's a trend that, if it continues, could at least increase flexibility in the minds of future generations regarding religion. And I think that there's a potential for that to be a positive thing, just because we get so many letters to the show from people in families that are fundamentalists where it's completely unacceptable for a family member to be different faiths. So what we see most of the time in our mail when someone is writing because they have a problem about coming out or telling their family that they're atheists is that you've got a family that is unified by their religion, which is what religion likes to promote, the idea that, we help bring families together. The problem is they only help bring families together when everybody is on the same page. And the moment someone steps, one toe across that line, they are rejected and hated and completely disowned.
Yeah, religion is a great social
Right.
construct as long as you're part of the in-group.
Yeah, the moment you're just
not
like,
that,
yeah. And so with this, what we're seeing are families where they're more likely to be more flexible and not be as dogmatic about what members do or don't believe. I will say it reminded me a little bit of a friend of mine who raised her children, exposing them to a lot of different religious ideologies, and she was telling me about that. Like they went and studied like Buddhism, and they studied Hinduism, and ultimately what I asked her was, did you ever present them with the idea that there may be like no need for a faith, that atheism is an option as well? And she hadn't. And so it's still possible that what you're looking at is the potential for the idea that you choose a religion as long as you choose a religion.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, that's true, but I mean, it sounds to me like if you're growing up in a home with multiple faiths, one of the side effects is that you're probably not going to take either one of those faiths like particularly more serious than the other, which means you can't go too far into fundamentalism one way or the other.
Yeah.
Because if you if you're a fundamentalist living with, let's say, a Hasidic Jew, it's going to be pretty difficult to coexist and continue to respect each other. So I would imagine that a child raised in a home with two different faith parents is going to get kind of a weakened, watered down version of each faith. And I think that can only be good for kids ultimately deciding to be atheists. And
right.
so, that's one reason why it's incumbent among atheists with the less popular or well-known point of view to be ready to step in and say, hey, have you considered the possibility that it's all nonsense?
Right, or that there's, exactly. And they also talked about the effects, the potential effects, I guess, of people looking at marriage as more unions for personal satisfaction as opposed to like a family rearing unit. And so that may be impacting this as well, the way that we've moved away from the idea that children are necessary in a marriage, or that children are like a reason for a marriage.
Oh yeah, sure.
And so that could have an impact, that people are thinking less in terms of how would this impact children, and they're not really taking that as seriously. There were a lot of interesting points made, like some things that I wouldn't have thought of that they brought up in the article. And it's a little bit lengthy. It's not too long. I think if you're interested in it, you could probably go down to the Christian Science Monitor, log in, look at the cover story, and probably have it read within the half hour. So I don't think it's that bad if this is something that interests you. But I do think that it has the potential to be a positive trend in moving people away from dogmatism and fundamentalism and toward more flexible views about religious ideology.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I think we should look at this as a good thing. Does the article give any speculations about what could be causing this change? Or
they think, it's just that we have a way more diverse culture at this point. We've got people just coming in from all over the place and just mixing it up a lot more. People have, there's also been like spikes in interracial marriage, for example, that have corresponded to this. So I just think people are more and more inclined. They said that at the beginning of the 20th century, it was like 1 in 10 marriages were interfaith, and now most marriages are likely to be interfaith.
Yeah, I think I would imagine that there's also something to do with the fact that meeting people from all over the world is a lot easier now. Like travel is easier, but also instant communication with people in other states is much, much easier.
Well, and one of the stats was like 28% of people said that they had switched religions, and then they said that if you included the different Protestant sects as separate religions, then the number jumps to like 44% or something like that. So it's like it really spikes. So people are moving around within Protestantism a lot, and outside of Protestantism, still it's almost 30%. So people are really, really kind of, I guess, questioning and thinking about their religious views and being willing to change that. I know that, we were talking earlier, and my mother was raised Italian Catholic, my dad was Midwest Protestant. And for them, when they got married, that was a huge deal. It's just a huge, huge mess.
Right.
Of, you don't do that. Nobody was happy. The Catholic family wasn't happy that the husband wasn't happy about getting married in the Catholic Church, and the Protestant family was wondering, why are you marrying this Catholic? And so it was just a big, ugly mess. And it looks like today that's just not something that people are worrying about as much in at least growing trends.
Yeah, and it feels like exposure to diversity is like bad for very conservative religions. I mentioned a few times in some talks I've done that evangelical Christian Josh McDowell has been going around the country saying you got to watch out for kids' access to the internet because that's giving everybody equal access to your kids, and then it's destroying their faith.
They're seeing information. And it's not good because they're finding out that what we're telling them isn't true.
Right.
Yeah, it's really painful for Josh McDowell, I'm sure, because that was the guy that, the apologist that convinced me at 15 to believe the Bible was inspired. And after I did some research at a university library, I found out it was a bunch of crap.
And that just warms my heart.
Yeah, and so now, at the time I did it, there was no internet. Now there's an internet, and you can find out it's crap in 5 minutes. So you don't have to wait years and go to the university. You can actually look it up for yourself.
Or at least you can be exposed to the idea that it's crap. You might ultimately decide to stick with it.
That maybe they're not telling you the whole story, which is what I should say. That's what I pretty much discovered, was that what I was told was the story was part of the story, but not the whole. They left out the parts that didn't really feed into their theories so much.
Yeah, nothing beats absolute certainty out of you faster than stepping into an internet forum and saying anything at all.
Yeah. And then starting to get questions. Absolutely.
Well, that's really interesting.
It was interesting, I thought. So, little
Okay.
tidbit for today.